So today I would like to talk about the paradox that we need to manage, which is basically between exploiting the opportunities that we already have and we know about and exploring new opportunities, or in other words, making sure that the ladder that we're climbing is leaning against the right wall. Because the danger is that we will be getting really productive and really efficient at doing things that we shouldn't be doing at all. So what's the use of doing right something that shouldn't be done at all, right? And the problem is that we are changing as people, and then the changes in the world are happening faster than ever. So there are new opportunities popping up, and there are also threats to our current businesses and so on. So how do we manage the paradox? How much time do we spend developing our own things that come from the past, and how much time we're exploring what else to do? Or another way to put this paradox is, for example, if you have to write 100 articles, how much time should you spend investigating how to write better articles or how to write faster articles versus should you just sit down and write 100 articles, right? So what do you think about this paradox?
Yeah, okay. So for me, what you mentioned seems, I'm reminded of two things. Thing number one is that in statistics, you have two kinds of errors. You have a validity error and you have a reliability error. And the reliability means, let's say, you're playing darts, and it's just you're going all over the place with the darts. And if you're improving the reliability, you are more focused. But if you focus on the wrong target, meaning the validity is wrong, then it might be that you're actually quite precise in your throwing of darts, but you're going on the wrong target. So it's kind of what you're saying was you're efficient in the way that, yes, you're getting the things done that you want to achieve, but you are not effective because what you're achieving is not exactly what you need in order to achieve your ultimate goals. And the second thing that I was reminded of was the paradox of sharpening the saw from the book 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, where the person might tell you, look, I'm not able to sharpen the saw because I have so much sawing to do that I don't have the time for it. But in fact, it would be much more efficient to take a moment to sharpen the saw, and then you would be able to easily cut the rest of the wood. Do I understand this right? I mean, are these?
Yes, exactly. That's pretty much it. That there's also more to it. I mean, for example, Google, the way they decide about this is they spend 70% of time and resources on their current business that makes the money, which is like AdWords, but then they have 20% allocated on projects that will extend it in some way that they still have competence in, and they're like pretty safe bets. And then 10% they spend on complete moonshots that have very low chance of becoming great, but if they become great, they can be completely revolutionary, right? So that's like one way maybe to manage this paradox that Google implements.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, there are two kinds of tasks that I could be doing, which are a little bit different from my regular job. One task would be to focus on something which is maybe not going to lead to success. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's experimental. But if it leads to success, it's going to be great, and it might change my what I'm doing right now totally. And the second thing is that I'm doing something which is also not my real task. For example, cutting wood, but it's something related to it, making it more efficient. For example, I'm sharpening the saw so I can cut wood more efficiently, or I'm reading about how to write articles better so that once I spend the time reading on it, I actually become more proficient and I can do it much, much faster.
Exactly.
Right? So it means that not only is the work that is 100% related to what we want to accomplish. Let's say I want to write 100 articles, so I'm just spent my time writing articles. Instead of doing that, I might want to consider two things. One, how can I improve my writing of articles so that I can write those articles in a much higher quality and much faster? And the second kind of task is to think about what other ways I might have to achieve my ultimate goal. Because my ultimate goal might be to get 1 million subscribers on a blog on YouTube. If I then see YouTube is much easier to create videos and attracts much more people, then maybe spending 100 hours or spending 1,000 hours to write 100 articles is the time wasted, because I could have used it to create videos on YouTube, which could have been much more successful. So those two things, making me more effective in what I do, and second, exploring other tasks which could be much better than what I'm currently doing. Do you understand?
Exactly. And I think there are two more concepts here. That one is the role of luck. A lot of people work really hard, but some people happen to be by chance in the good place and the good time, and that's when they will be much more rewarded for their work. And the other thing is that sometimes exploring something completely outside of the normal path will lead to a new perspective, which gives amazing insights, because most people have similar perspective. They went to school, they got the good grades, they got a job, they just know this known world. But if you venture out of that reality and you start reading some like obscure books and like get really into some strange different domains and subjects, you might have a very interesting perspective on the world. So for example, Steve Jobs taking calligraphy course, at first
I was just thinking about the same. I was going to mention it.
Exactly. He didn't see how this would be useful in any way, and it was something completely unmonetizable. So that's another key insight, that sometimes things that are not monetizable at the moment, but they are building your skills, that are growing your mind, will come super handy in 10 years. You don't even know it.
Exactly. Yeah. And related to that, sometimes companies have realized that, and they try to get people to learn something which is not related to the job, because they see somehow certain concepts from other domains can be imported to the main job. So that is kind of a third task, which is not really your work, but it's something else, which we said you can have a task which you think might lead to your objective in a different way. And then thirdly, you might have something which is totally different, but it still might make sense. And then a fourth one you mentioned is where I might not be aware of a certain thing, what's happening, if I'm 100% focused on my job. So for example, there was the internet opportunity. And there were maybe many entrepreneurs who were in the old economy who were so focused on their job, on growing the business, that they didn't realize that there was the internet and there was a lot of money to be made with the internet. And some others had an open space in their mind to look at new things that were happening, maybe via the news, maybe just thinking about new things, being open to new things. And they realized this opportunity, and then they realized that maybe they should stop working on their current job and do something different related to the internet. Or the same thing with the smartphone. There were Nokia and Ericsson that were very focused on becoming or being the number one in the segment of producing mobile phones, which they were and probably still are in that kind of phones. But then came the smartphone, and they didn't realize it, and because they paid attention to their current business model. And so there was a smartphone which totally outcompeted them, and now nobody else is buying a mobile phone which is not a smartphone, right? So you're talking about those 4 areas where it might make sense to not only focus on what you're doing right now, but to venture into other directions and do something different. Okay.
And I think one of the big insights is not to beat yourself up for not being overly efficient, productive, or whatever, when you are exploring something where you're following your heart, when it's actually, you are very curious about this new subject, and maybe there's no way to monetize it that you see right now, but it makes you feel alive to study it. Maybe you're developing certain skills. Maybe you are even volunteering somewhere and learning and meeting people and just like changing your perspective. And it looks like a waste of time if you think about time only about like making money. but maybe in the future, this will give you that insight that will make you 5 million later on. And another interesting thing that I've noticed is that people pay a lot of attention to what's happening like right now within the last 24 hours. That's where you have the news and then the gossip magazines and all of that, like what happened right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the two very interesting parts where we should focus as well is like the whole history, like even anthropology and all of that, like where we actually came from and like how did we evolve and what are implications of that on our lives today. And also what will be ready in 5 years, for example, because maybe you should start developing your business right now for the moment when this technology will be mature and this price of the chip will be, let's say, much lower. And then this will create a new opportunity to disrupt some industry or something.
Mm-hmm.
So the future that's going to happen in, let's say, 5 years by watching trends, where they're going. So we will see that, let's say, everyone will be having internet access at some point in the world, right? And this is a trend, and this is the trend. You can see it on the chart, and then thinking what needs will be there and what opportunities, and then starting maybe preparing for that even today.
So, Sebastian, what recommendation would you give to people who are very focused on becoming successful and maybe, let's say, making a lot of money, and they found a certain kind of business that they want to build, thinking that this business will make them a lot of money, and they work on this 60 hours a week, and they're not advancing. Can you give them some recommendations related to how they might be working too much or on too narrow things?
Well, one of the good ones for the situation you described would be to validate key hypotheses about their new idea. So what has to be the truth in order for this business to work, right? So we have to be able, for example, to acquire customers for $40 or less. Can we actually do it? Let's do it before we have a product even, right? Or all kinds of things like this. So verifying all of that. And then this will allow you to quickly validate the model so that you don't spend too much time. I'm really worried that a lot of people who have, let's say, 1 or 2 years plan will be late to the marketplace or will create something that will be not, useful for people because the world is changing so fast as well. So maybe choosing shorter periods and verifying as many hypotheses as you can that you are truly climbing a ladder that's leaning against the right wall would be a good idea. And then also following your passions, following your curiosity, just exploring different things and not being afraid of the fact that you're putting a lot of time into something that's not monetizable immediately. Because maybe your volunteering, maybe your YouTube channel that you do just for the kicks will lead to some insights or some skills that will be used in the next 10 years to create something massive. So if you're learning new things, if you're gaining skills, if you're building new perspectives that are unique, that are outside of the beaten path that everyone follows, but something very strange, interesting to you, that will all contribute to your success in the end. So you can relax and not beat yourself up too much, even for exploring those things.
Could you give me an example of such a skill? I mean, you mentioned that Steve Jobs was studying the way to design fonts. I think it's called calligraphy. And he was then able to use that knowledge later on while designing Apple operating systems. And even though he never knew that this would be useful knowledge.
Yeah.
Do you have some examples from your own life where you were studying stuff that you didn't study just in order to make a lot of money, and then later on you found actually this is very helpful?
Yes, actually my biggest business was born this way. I went to Panama and I wanted to learn Spanish. And I was just learning Spanish. That's not something that's monetizable immediately, especially. So just the frustration of learning Spanish in like the traditional way with a teacher led me to some realizations about how vocabulary could be taught to students and how which words are more useful in the language than other words. And in the end, it ended up being the business. So sometimes you can see the pain in some area and you can be like, hey, why are we doing it in this lame way? Maybe there is a better way. Let me research and then come up with something. Right now, I'm also working on something diet related, let's say, that might also have some potential. I don't know yet. I'm exploring, I'm experimenting, I'm doing what I call basic research, which is, throwing maybe a lot of time and money into the thing just to figure out what could be possible in the area. What are the interesting insights that I can see?
Okay. The example you gave, I understand the example, but I think it's a little bit different because you studied a certain thing which was not for making money, and while you were doing that, you saw that there was a market, that you saw that there was a new way, and you actually went into that market. So while in Steve Jobs' example, he was studying calligraphy, he had a company, and then he was able to use that knowledge for the software. So he was doing a business. He didn't change the focus of the business. He just was able to use something which he didn't know he would be able to use for that business. While in your case, it's more you saw a new market because you studied something which was not for making money, and then you discovered a market in which you then made a business in that market. Have you also an example where you studied something which you didn't know was going to be useful for the business, and then later on you had another business where you were able to use that knowledge?
Well, one of the examples would be that I started this magazine in Poland back in the day when I was like, I don't know, 17, 19, something like that, which was available by computer and by mobile phones. And it was like black and white internet called WAP. And I was practicing writing articles, I was practicing interviewing people. And that led me to then have a job in the mobile internet magazine. And that was paying me, So whenever you build a new skill doing something for free, for fun, because you're passionate about it, and you gain the expertise in the area and you gain the certain skills, and you can use them for the rest of your life. So I think speaking English or being able to code, being able to write, those skills will be forever useful, and you can acquire them doing something completely different, right? Not necessarily money making.
Okay. Now, we talked about several things that a person can do, which is besides his main work, which can be beneficial for him. One of those things is, you can call it sharpening the saw, which is increasing your skills in that area so that you are more effective in the future. Other things are studying a skill which is maybe not related to your work, where maybe later on you will see that actually you can use it in your work, or opening up to new opportunities, seeing new opportunities, and reading about new opportunities, which maybe later on you're going to focus on those opportunities. So for those last two cases, I don't really know before the fact that this is going to be valuable, right?
Yes.
I don't know if it's going to be valuable. I'm just studying it, not really to make money, or I'm researching the market, not really to make money, don't really think about changing my job, but maybe I discover something that is going to be useful for me. Maybe I discover a new market. Now, the question is for me, how do I know what to focus on besides my job? So what to research or what skills to learn? Because you're saying, well, you don't want to only focus on those skills which are valuable for your job. You might just want to focus on some other skills which maybe later on you can use in your job or in your business. So how do I know what to focus on?
Well, I think we all knew it when we were children, for example. Why would you play in this way, not in that way? Because it felt better. Like whatever is fascinating to you, wherever your curiosity is leading you, that's whatever makes you more alive. That's where you should be going, right? And then it's easy because you're getting pleasure immediately. You're getting in the flow. For example, I was recently learning how to cook, and that's like the ultimate flow. It feels like making stuff from Legos or something. So it gave me the same feeling that I had as a child, just messing with things, experimenting, trying to build something, trying to see what would happen if I did this or that. So it's almost like playing. So whatever makes you want to play with it and go deeper in it and is a reward in and of itself is probably a good choice.
Okay. All right. Understood. Now, I think the problem for me would be this, that my passion might be cooking. My passion might be dancing. My passion might be tennis. My passion might be geography, learning about human anatomy. And all of those things potentially in the future could influence my business, because I might find a certain way from a certain kind of dance, or might find a certain way from a human anatomy that actually I come up with a business idea that I wouldn't have been able to come up with if I wouldn't have studied that.
Yes.
The thing is, I don't know right now what of those fields are, which fields I should study in order to maybe in the future come up with an idea. So you're saying, well, you just do what you're passionate about. But the question is what I'm passionate about really the most likely to contain, to give me ideas that would change the course of my business or will lead me to a different business? So it's easy for Steve Jobs to say, well, it was good for me to have studied other subjects that didn't have to do anything with my main course, because later on I was able to use those subjects, because it's post factum, because he knew that he was able to use it. Now, there was maybe 1,000 other people would have done the same thing as Steve Jobs did, studied something totally unrelated, and they were not able to use it. It's just luck. It's just basically it's coincidence that he was able to use it. Now, so I would say that I have studied a lot of things in my life. I've studied a lot of languages. I studied a lot about geography, about culture, and so on. And I don't really see how I can use these things. In fact, I would say I know a lot of other people that do not have knowledge in other areas, do not have other interests. They're very singularly focused on business and on a very specific business. They're not interested in anything else. And they have an advantage over me, because I have a large interest. Like right now, our discussion, it's not my main business. I'm just interested in these discussions. Now, other people are not. They have the sole focus on the business, and they might only be able to do this one business. They might not be able to do anything else. And I think that's makes them more successful. So I would argue that there is a disadvantage to being too focused, because you might be missing out on certain opportunities. There is an advantage of being too focused, because you will have a single focus. You focus all of your energy, all of your mental energy on achieving one thing. And you don't know if it's more of an advantage or more of a disadvantage. But in balance, for the majority of people, I would argue that being 100% focused is better than being unfocused or doing those things which you mentioned.
Well, I think it really depends on what kind of success you want, because if you want to be very creative, if you want to come up with original insights, then probably you need to spend a lot of time on basic research. A lot of this basic research will just go to the trash. It will not be useful, exactly as it happens for the scientific basic research as well, right? So it's exploring different things, and sometimes once in, I don't know, like 4 times out of 100 or something, you stumble upon something that's truly revolutionary and will give you the perspective and the advantage that no one else has, because you will see reality from such an angle that you will see this obvious opportunity and no one else will be even seeing it, because they're looking from their narrow perspective. So who knows, maybe your background will also help you, but not yet, but in 12 years, for example. And all the things that you accumulated in terms of skills and so on will become useful once something else happens. So that's how Steve Jobs was saying it, that we need to trust that the dots will connect in the end. So yeah, we cannot know it immediately.
Yeah, but if they do connect, then we're going to go out to the world and going to say, this is what needs to be done. I was successful because of it. But in the 999 cases where dots do not connect, people just die not having achieved success because they were unfocused. But let me ask you, do you think that a bigger problem for entrepreneurs who want to be successful, meaning who want to create a successful company, is to be too focused or is to be too little focused?
I think the key is to be very good at like saying no to opportunities when you see them. I think Warren Buffett was saying like 99-to-1 ratio. And Steve Jobs also was really proud of everything that Apple did not do.
Yes.
So once you open yourself to opportunities and you examine a lot of opportunities, you actually focus on very few of those which are really, really like the highest value. Because what I see people do a lot is they just get a random idea and they just start doing it without even allowing it to incubate, 3 months, 6 months, having it in the back of your mind, but also verifying some hypotheses or building some skills. Like right now, I'm talking about this diet thing. Like I have no idea what I'm going to do with it yet, but I will explore different things. I will experiment with different things, and that will give me maybe in the longer run some clear one idea that will be successful. Whereas if I started immediately to go out there and trying to do it when it's not ready as an idea, then it would fail and not necessarily,
Okay, but now you're saying that I would say the answer to the question, if the problem is more being too focused or too little focused, would be you think it's more that entrepreneurs are too little focused. And I would agree with that. I think the main problem of entrepreneurs is that they get very excited. Generally, I'm just talking about general entrepreneur type. He gets very excited about business opportunities quite easily. And he is a person who takes action. Other people just think, he actually takes action. So he does it for one idea, but then there are other opportunities that present themselves. And he would say, look, I can also do that. And he thinks about it and he actually takes action. He does it. So he might end up working on 5 different projects, or within each project, within each business, he's working on 5 different sub-projects. So he's not being focused, and he's not successful in any of the business because he's not focused enough. So I would think too little focus in entrepreneurs is much more common than too much focus. And I think too much focus is quite rare. And now maybe we can talk about the circumstances where you feel too much focus is the case. Because what's cute, the paradox is that on the one hand, Steve Jobs was very proud of saying, look, I have killed all these different projects. In fact, when he came in 1997 to Apple, he drew 14 different projects the company was working on, and he crossed out 12 of those projects, saying that only 2 projects, the iMac and the 4G, was the project he wanted to work on. But at the same time, the same guy said, it's good to explore things. It's good to learn different stuff that might not be useful for your business, which means being unfocused. So he's saying we need to focus, but at the same time, he's saying sometimes not being focused is good. So then the question is, when is focus required, and when is it maybe better not to be too focused?
But do you see the distinction? He's saying like, look at a lot of opportunities, but look, don't make them, don't do them, don't jump on them. Look and explore and just like see them, and then only do the ones that are most valuable, they have highest potential. And that's what I'm seeing entrepreneurs getting random idea that's lame and it has no much potential, and they just work at it for way too long for no reason. They think that this is the thing, and it's not. And it's quite obvious to a lot of other people that they're looking at it, it's like, no. And they stick to it maybe for too long, instead of validating maybe some hypothesis if they're really into it, and then moving on if this doesn't work. And being very kind of careful what you start working on. So what you look at, what you explore, yes, explore hundreds of opportunities, learn about them, know about them. But when you actually commit your resources and you start working on it, that's where you should be very careful that this is the absolute best opportunity that you were able to identify, and this will work because there are so many different good things about this idea, and it kind of resonates with you and you would love to do that, and you're good at it, and maybe it's utilizing some of the unique talents that you have.
Okay, which sounds very similar to the creative process, which is in the creative process, you need to, at the beginning, brainstorm, be open, be not focused, get a lot of ideas, and then you need to kind of sort them, become more structured, and then you decide on which ideas you actually finally want to implement. And then once you're in the implementation, in the execution stage, then you want to be very focused and not go back to broad, open-minded brainstorming, but only stick with the ideas you're working on. So different stages of the process, the discovery stage and the execution stage.
Yes. And if you, for example, start your own blog or your own YouTube channel, there will be a process of you finding your message and finding your audience. So it will take some time for you to see what you love to talk about the most, for example, but also what does the audience like from what you talk about the most. And those two forces will, over time, let's say 6 months, a year, give you the crystallized vision of that blog or YouTube channel. So you don't start knowing that. You start having some assumptions and trying, and then pivoting how you see that now you don't want to talk about this subject, you're more focused on this, and then like you see that the audience actually responds to this. So you're trying to find some sort of overlap between what is really fascinating to you and what's really valuable to the audience.
Now, in case you go from a theoretical scenario in which the person doesn't have an idea, he just has finished university and now he wants to see what he wants to do with his life. So of course he's in the discovery phase, and he might go through this discovery phase. He might test certain things and then decide, okay, I want to do maybe 2 things, focus on those, and then finally decide on one thing, and then continue doing this one thing in a very focused way. So he goes from discovery phase to the structuring phase to the execution phase. But most people are not in that situation where they just finished university and now they're open for anything to come. Most people are already working on something. So how do these people know if they should be open for more things, meaning for new opportunities, maybe be willing to change, or if they should just stay course, just continue to focus on what they're already doing and just try harder and harder and harder until they succeed? How do I know in which situation I am?
I think the answer is within. It's like whatever you feel more excited about. Do you feel super excited about your job, so you want to grow in that and you want to be the best at what you do because this is so fascinating to learn about it? Or are you actually not that passionate about your job and there's this other thing that you're super passionate about? Then go there. Where whatever makes you feel alive in the end will give you a massive advantage over people who are suffering to learn this stuff and you are loving this stuff, right?
Okay, but now you're saying go with what you're excited about. The question is the level of excitement a good indicator of how successful you will be in a business? To be honest, I don't think so. I think you should not work on what you're excited about. Many times you should work on the things that are just dull. What do you say?
Well, given the fact that you can be unsuccessful either way, I would rather have a blast working on something that I'm super excited about and have it not work than having this dual thing and have it not work anyway. So yeah, I mean, if we spend so much time working in our lives, I think there's absolutely no reason to work on something we don't like, because we can totally be excellent at something that we love and then make enough money to cover our needs from that, especially if we reach some high levels of excellence. And I'm not talking about some extreme examples where, you know, someone will be a poet and will be starving poet or something, right? But like every one of us has at least like 2 or 3 things that they are passionate about, and out of some of that, there might be some revenue of income, some income from that. So eventually, when you reach some high levels of skill and maybe you will build some community around things, you will become a leader of a local community that's interested in that, and then opportunities open up, right? If you,
I would caution, for example, a lot of people are passionate about certain areas. For example, a lot of guys are passionate about computer games. A lot of people go to online dating, and that's why they see opportunities to improve it. And a lot of people are passionate about a dating business. or they every day have to do some work. They're using a project management system. So a lot of people might be interested in improving a project management system, meaning building a project management system. So a lot of people get excited about the same things. And unfortunately, since a lot of people are following your advice naturally, they do what they're excited about, there's a lot of competition in those areas in which people generally get excited about. For example, gaming, dating, project management systems, if you're talking about online businesses. On the other hand, if you're talking about a garbage collection business, I know a person who has done a really successful business doing garbage collection or recycling business. Well, people are not so excited about that. So there was not much competition. So in business, the level of difficulty always correlates to the level negatively to the level of competition. The more competition there is, the more difficult it's going to be to make profit. So if you go into business where a lot of people are excited about, meaning there's going to be a lot of competition, it's going to be more difficult. So maybe you should go to the least boring fields, do business in those fields, or actually get a job in those fields that nobody else wants to, because everybody thinks it's boring. And actually, you can be very successful in that field. And you can actually change things. And many times you don't really know what it really means to be working in there for years. When you're talking about, what you're excited about means, there are 1,000 fields that I could be potentially excited about, but I haven't worked in these 1,000 fields. So I just have a certain level of excitement about the garbage recycling industry right now because I don't know it. Now, this excitement is kind of low. So maybe if I now say I shouldn't go into that industry, it would be wrong because I don't know the industry yet. Maybe if I go in there, I'm really excited about it. And this is actually quite likely because since it's and on the first side, not exciting industry, not many people go into that industry, which means a lot of opportunities. And with a lot of opportunities, probably more exciting. So what I'm saying is what appears to be exciting might turn out very competitive, not so good, and actually not so exciting. What appears to be not very exciting and boring, in fact, might turn out to be no competition, many opportunities, and in fact, very exciting.
That is a very good point, and I can see how it works. Yeah, you're right. That's true. On the other hand, I think if you go by the broad category of something that everyone is excited about, that's one thing, because that's where a lot of competition is. But if you find your unique take on it that will add massive value, and here I'm coming back to the idea of being very discriminating in terms of which ideas you're actually following, right? So you only actually start implementing something when you know that you have something of an incredible potential that's so much better than everything else. And other than that, you're just exploring and you're learning and you're growing, and you're not focusing that much work on that. So if you have a very diverse experience, you may take some practices and strategies from one industry and apply it in a different industry, for example, and that can be a huge disruption. So that's how innovation gets created, by people who are mavericks, who have very unique life experiences that give them this unique perspective. So they might combine two different industries into a third industry that wasn't even there before. Like there's this book, Blue Ocean Strategy, that talks about this kind of things, right? So I agree that some niches of the market are very crowded if everyone is trying to do the same thing. But if you have this different disciplines that you're passionate about and maybe you learn from, and then you can combine and see new opportunities in some way, maybe connect with the new medium that's coming, like I don't know, then another Instagram will be coming in 5 years, and you can see that opportunity is there for this and then this and that. There might be some opportunity for big disruptive innovation that way.
True. Yeah. Of course, you don't see all the opportunities that exist. I mean, right now, there are millions of opportunities, and we both only see a very, very small percentage. And the kind of opportunities that we see are those opportunities that a lot of other people also see, because they're not, let's say, industry specific. I don't need to be in a certain industry in order to see that opportunity. For example, content creation on YouTube, or, as I said, gaming or dating, where everybody is using those tools created by those businesses, so we can see opportunities in those areas. But in specific industries, for example, in the garbage collection industry, there might be huge opportunities, but we don't see it because we don't work in this industry. And what I learned from doing internships in different companies for a short period of time. I go to a company, I think it's not exciting at all. I then work in the company for a few days, and I already see opportunities. I already see massive opportunities. And I'm sure if I would stay in the company for a longer period of time, I would see even more opportunities, and I would be very excited about these opportunities. Just that if I don't know the industry, I don't see the opportunities that exist in that industry.
That's a very good point. That is a very good point. That's why you should have always your eyes open and looking for interesting connections, insights, opportunities. And maybe you saw the opportunities also because you were bringing a fresh perspective that the person from within that industry did not see because of your. So that's why it's good to change industries sometimes, to just be very kind of broad in that way, because you will bring expertise from one industry to the next and will completely like change the game for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Sebastian, let's summarize what we discussed so far. So you mentioned that sometimes it is productive for a person to achieve success, not to work in a too focused manner only on his current tasks, but to do some other tasks which in different ways might help him to achieve success. And so what we mentioned was, one, that a person might sharpen the saw, or he might increase his capacity to do the task. He might learn new stuff, he might learn new skills, and that way be more productive. Another thing we looked at is that you might be doing research into new areas that you didn't know before, maybe not very related to your job, which might give you new insights to do something totally different or to change the way that you're doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Third, we looked at sometimes there are cases where you can study something which is totally unrelated, and only later on you connect the dots and you see how you can apply what you studied within your work. Anything else that I missed out on?
I think those are the main points, and also to be very discriminating about ideas, right? If you have
right,
20,
but I think that's kind of the other side. So I was talking about how to be less focused. That there's certain ideas where sometimes less focus is good, and then of course we talked about that generally focus is very important. And then you said how you can achieve the focus by, for example, as you just said,
yes,
focusing on, be very discriminating with the ideas. So maybe at the beginning you are quite open, you gather a lot of ideas, you do an exploratory phase, but then later on you cut out majority, 99% of all ideas, and you focus on something, and you're very closely focused. Now there was, we talked about that sometimes focus is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the majority of times focus is very important, and sometimes focus can actually be negative. And now the question then for us was, how do you know when you need to focus 100% and not do anything else, and when on the other hand you might kind of zoom out and be open to new things, learn new stuff which might not be related to your job, so being less focused. So how do I make that distinction? What would you say?
So your question is basically, how do you know that you want to now focus fully, for example, on something, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, okay, you had this discovery phase and you identified a lot of different opportunities. You decided on the one that has the highest potential, and then you design experiments to validate hypotheses. So then when you focused fully for some time, which is quite short time actually, to just start getting feedback from reality, that's validating the most important hypothesis, let's say, for this business, right? So it doesn't have to take 2 years. You can, take 3-6 months and implement all this like minimal viable product and go to the marketplace, see what they say, see if you can pivot somehow, how you can learn. Because many things, start as one thing and then through pivoting end up being something completely different. So you need to keep an open mind. But if you are pursuing opportunity that you see that it's like of amazing value and you're getting good feedback from the marketplace, then definitely focus on that, because it's that feedback loop that you're looking for in the end.
Okay. All right. So I would add that you know for yourself the level of excitement you have. If the level of excitement is not strong enough that you in the morning jump out of bed and you want to get to work as an entrepreneur, then probably you yourself know, or at least subconsciously know, that the likelihood that what you're doing right now will lead to success is quite small. And therefore, you should probably stop working on it, or at least be open to new ideas, any kind of new ideas. If the level of excitement is very strong and you really think you know what you're doing, then go ahead and work on it. But I would say, just as you mentioned before, there are many entrepreneurs who are extremely excited about what they're working on, when in fact, you talk to them, I talk to them, a lot of people talk to them, and they feel that's not going to work. So you should always be open to feedback, and not just push the feedback aside, but if a lot of people tell you, hey, this is not going to work, then maybe you should doubt yourself. And maybe if you doubt yourself at some point, you're not going to be excited enough to get up from your bed and start working, in which case it's the right time to either stop working or at least consider other ideas, other markets, or other things to be working on.
Yeah, and I think, okay, people will tell you that your idea sucks no matter what, because they will not believe in your idea if it's revolutionary. And, no one would believe that, I don't know, Uber or Airbnb would actually work in reality, right? When they were presented with the idea, like so much trusting strangers, that was impossible. But I think the most important feedback is not from like opinions of random people, but from validating hypotheses by doing the minimal viable product, going to the marketplace, seeing real data. How do customers actually react? And we can get that feedback much faster without building the whole product infrastructure or whatnot. So there's this idea of like getting out of the building and doing the things that don't scale, right? So we can maybe simulate a working of huge system that we are planning to build manually by hand. And there was this startup, Food on the Table, I think, that these guys did their whole platform. What the platform was supposed to do, they were doing it manually, and they were going to like customers' homes and doing everything manually until they knew that this would work. And after that, they built the platform. And yeah.
Correct. I would caution, though, that the difference between success and failure generally is only something like 10%. So if let's say the marketing cost and the monetization, say I'm doing a gaming business, I'm trying to get people to pay for a premium game, and I'm spending money on acquiring users, and I'm getting money from them when they're paying as a premium customer. The difference between successful companies and not successful companies is generally 10%, only 10%. So if the marketing cost just goes down because of some small improvements in the marketing, I might go from a non-successful company to a successful company. The same if the monetization goes up because of some small things I did, maybe just small changes in UI design, I can go from a not successful company to a successful company. Now, that is something that I cannot test in advance. So in a lot of businesses, I know that the value proposition is valid. I know that a dating app, if it works, a gaming app, if it works, most of the softwares would, I know, have a valid value proposition. The question I have is, how many users can I actually get for how much money, and how much would these users be willing to pay? And the difference between success and not success is 10%. So then the kind of the lean startup method does not make sense, because I cannot know by a margin of 10% if I'm going to be able to reduce the marketing cost efficiently enough, I'm going to be able to increase the monetization of customers sufficiently.
True, that's a good point, though a lot of ideas would not get enough traction to even be at this stage that you're mentioning, right? Because if you spend, I don't know, $1,000 on marketing and you are acquiring 0 customers, then you know you have a problem. But if you're spending 1,000 and you're getting back 800, then you probably can figure it out, right? So there's also some scale here, how the market is responding to your idea. And some businesses will have it close enough that the cost of marketing and the revenues will be almost matching. So you can definitely work on improving that. But if there's such a gap that like no one is actually interested in it, and then you will have verified your hypothesis, right?
Okay. All right. So, Sebastian, would you like to summarize?
Oh, I love summarizing, as you know. Well, the basic thing is that we have this paradox between exploring new opportunities and exploiting the ones that we've identified as good. So let's make sure that we only work on the highest potential value things and that we're guided by our intuition and by our motivation and curiosity to explore things that are not necessarily monetizable even at this moment, but might give us this unique, fresh perspective that will lead to certain insights that might lead to disruptive innovation. Let's have expertise in more than one domain so that we can cross the ideas from one domain, bring them to the next one, and be maybe very innovative for that and disruptive. So basically, the point is not to beat yourself up, even if you're doing something that's not monetizable right now, even if you're exploring something strange, because that can lead to success in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I think I would do a similar summary. I would say that generally it's better to be as focused as possible, but sometimes it's better to be not so focused and do some other things which are not directly related to your work. Like, for example, getting new skills, which might improve your work performance. Getting skills outside your work area, which in some way you might be able to use later on. Or just studying, researching, being open to new ideas and to new developments in the market, which might in the future make you realize that you should be working in a different way or working on something totally different. The problem is that we don't know what is more important. If we are just freshly graduated from university, then probably we are on the stage where we don't want to be too focused, explore a lot of ideas, and then later on focus on the most important ideas and pursue those. But if we are already working on different projects, work or entrepreneurial projects, then we need to make a decision. Are we in the, how much do we want to spend time on new stuff, on maybe being open to new ideas? And how much are we really focused on the execution of this one idea that we're pursuing? And it's a difficult choice. We both agree that the level of excitement you have when getting out of bed and working on it is a good indicator of how much you should be focused.